Perhaps we could begin with a few words of aspiration. I take refuge in wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness. I take refuge in the full richness of here. I take refuge in the ever-present immediacy of now. Truth is all-pervading. It is the suchness of this moment, the thusness that we are. Refuge is to live within the truth. However innumerable beings are, we vow to meet them with kindness and interest. However inexhaustible the states of suffering are, we vow to touch them with patience and love. However immeasurable the dharmas are, we vow to explore them deeply and thoroughly. However incomparable the mystery of interbeing, we vow to surrender to it freely. From this day forth, with wisdom and compassion as our lamp and staff, I dedicate all my life energies to the welfare of all beings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We have a topic for our time together. Someone asked me just before we left Tauranga, what are you going to teach down in Queenstown? And I said, well, I don't know, I'm not there yet. And then I said, but we're just calling it Primordial Dharma. But Primordial Dharma is not something that one teaches. I mean, if you, people have all kinds of understandings of what the word Dharma means. It could be teaching and the Buddhist teaching, and it's definitely some Buddhist stuff, right? We have a kind of a feeling with this word. And you know, if we think of dar as the root of the verb to hold or support, or you get it? It's more than the word. Right? There's something there, and it's not there. It's not holding a support there. It's like right here. It's like when you mime this daring, right? It's sort of, it's not holding and supporting like that, right? It's. So show me your understanding of Dhar. Show it to me. Right? I mean, you want me to sit here perhaps and sort of throw little intellectual ideas towards you, but I would like it if we could dance. It's a little bit awkward all sitting in this crowded room like this, right? But so I want you have to, I do something and then you kind of have to respond. You say, so we, dar, right? Dar, right? And it has a kind of I want you to say the word, right? You know, it says Dhamma, which is very kind of, you know, Pali kind of Dhamma, you know, it's kind of da, huh. You know, it's almost like keeping it at a distance, you know, the Dhamma, right? But this is Dhar, right? You don't say Dharma, Dharma, you just go Dhar, right? I want to hear you, right, express this, right? Just Dhar, 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 Dhar. And then the second part is Ma, 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 Ma. Right? I mean, this is a universal. It's like that which mothers and holds us, that births us, that conceives us, that nurtures us, Dharma. Okay? And we talk about primordial, or I think of primordial. And for me, though, I don't mean the first Dharma. You know, I mean, we could say it's kind of primary and primordial have something to do with first. For me, it has more than that. It has a sense of it's first and second and third and fourth, and it's now. It's like primordial is ever fresh. It's like continuous, continuously just beginning, right? Primordial Dharma. Get it down. Get it on. Yeah, Primordial Dharma. Primordial Dharma. You'll go. Coming down, right? You get hot just thinking about it, right? You have to sort of start to strip off. Dharma, Primordial Dharma, right? Primordial Dharma. And then I kind of subtitled it in case somebody doesn't know what that means. And I say, well, explorations of meaningful living. You know, you have to throw in disruptive times just to get people to come, you know, like, oh yeah, we're going to go climate change and social disruption, economic disruption, political disruption, all this kind of, this is relevant, we're dealing with things. But actually, that's just a little add-on. Right? It's like meaningful living. And here's a question that I would like to sit with for a few moments. I'm going to express it as like a direct question to you. So, right? But I'm speaking to all of you in general. But I want to try and make this really personal. What do you mean by meaningful? What does meaningful mean to you? I mean, we can easily say, meaningful living, and then we go on to the things that are the meaningful living. But what is for me, how do I know something is meaningful? Meaningful living. Perhaps we have to begin by thinking of something that's meaningless. I don't know if you can conjure up something, a kind of meaningless thing, a meaningless Dharma, right, as opposed to a meaningful Dharma. What is the feeling? What is the kind of tactile, kinesthetic sense of being engulfed in a sense that this is meaningful?
Beneficial.
Sorry?
It's beneficial, doesn't go to waste.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely connected with it. But what's the tactile feeling? I don't know if you can actually even put this into words. I'm talking about tactile, kinesthetic, right? Because everything is in movement, is in motion. Everything is in motion. Your cells are in motion, our molecules are in motion, atoms are in motion. There's just motion. In fact, we're not quite sure what the thing is. Because the things, it's like motions of motions. It's almost as if the things are just kind of mere arbitrary conversation points. Because when we look, we just see constant kind of moving. There's a kind of kinesthetic, and in this, do you know what I'm talking about? Or did you wake up this morning like this and you're still like this? No, of course not, right? You smile and you move and you see someone and you respond and you shift and verbal stuff comes out and memories happen and all this kind of, and you in a sense move through the day, or what you call you is a moving through the day, or what you call you is a day moving through you moving through the day. Are you with me? We're beginning at the end. And there's a kind of, within this kind of movement, you know, there are kind of tactile appreciations of things like pressure, and force and density. And I'm trying to get at the actual feeling of the living. You know, like sometimes you move and it feels like really light and spacious. And other times it's like you're moving through treacle or something, or it's like there's a kind of a thick, heavy, gooey quality of the day. This is the reality that we live in continuously. Never mind concepts of this and mind and body and so on. That's all conversations about the juice of our living, and the juice of our living, which is with us all the time continuously. There's never a moment when this has not been for us, right? And yet it's virtually invisible to most people most of the time. So coming back to this question, like what do you mean by meaningful? Like, maybe I'll try another question on you, you know. What do you mean by, and then just fill in the name of someone who you have a very strong relationship with who's not here. Right? And then as soon as you invoke a sense of that person, right, there's a kind of a kinetic, tactile quality of beingness, right, which is identified in the way your eyes dance, in the way you listen, in the way you smell and taste, the quality of expectations, the reluctances or enthusiasms. I mean, we could talk forever about one tiny moment of experience. You get a sense of that. So in a sense, you know, you say, what's the, I mean, it's a bit of a strange thing to say what's the meaning of someone, you know, and you fill in the name. But I mean, it's no more ridiculous than the question that people apparently asked all over the place in the 1960s, what's the meaning of life? Okay? But the difficulty is we're constantly looking for life, for the answer, instead of recognizing that there is a quality of being in which whatever I'm experiencing or however I describe my experience feels meaningful. What is it? I think we need to examine this. I think to really raise the question of explorations of meaningful living, it's almost as if the meaningful part is the compass of the living. You know, it didn't just say explorations of living, it was explorations of meaningful living. We could say explorations of being a meanie while living. That probably highlights what we're not looking at. But this quality, like, can we begin to recognize? See, if you don't have a compass, we can talk about people losing their moral compass, right? But we can also talk about people losing their conceptual compass, right? They're kind of in their discerning evaluation of the situation and what's going on. They're off in cloud cuckoo land. Right? Just simply not discerning. So it's like really valuable to have a compass. Right? I mean, imagine for a moment, remember for a moment, approximately 2 hours before your head emerged into this world. I mean, I know it's going back a bit, right? But what kind of compass was life using at that moment, right? To make sure you sort of went in this direction and not in that direction. You know, in that direction was not getting born, and that direction is getting born. It sounds odd, right? But there's a kind of, I think of a compass as not just a, I mean, it's just a metaphor, isn't it? I mean, in a sense, we think of compass and magnetic north or south or something, and this kind of thing, right? But it's a sense of like orienting ourselves, right? Not just where we are, but when we begin to realize that the where we are is movement, that the whole thing is moving. Like I'm lost in the wilderness when everything inside my skin is moving, including my skin. The wilderness that I'm lost in is completely moving all the time too. When I know exactly that I'm at Queenstown Dharma Center, right, and I'm not lost, and I'm here, everything within my skin is completely moving, and everything outside my skin is completely moving. There's not the slightest difference between being lost and not lost, except there is. Right? One of them, you have a sense of a compass, like a sense of an orientation. Right? It's just like how do I orient my life? Do I orient my life on the basis of what others have told me I ought to orient my life on? Apparently Donald Trump just offered to buy Greenland. So if there wasn't enough lunacy going on in the pot, he sort of just threw that one in. Apparently the Greenlanders declined. Right? I mean, there's a different value system. Right? Like, do we orient ourselves to, like, my compass is avoiding blame and making sure that, basically I live in a way where people appreciate me. That's a pretty good compass. Okay? So the compass that I've got is, right, being seen as a sensible person, and a compass that I've got for sensibility is lots of possessions and money and power and stuff like that. Huh? Imagine for a moment that your compass was it pointed to meaningful or meaningless. Like, what's that? Right? Like, how do you describe this feeling? It doesn't really tell you a lot. I mean, I can orient myself with a compass and I still don't have a clue where I am beyond right here. Huh? You understand, right? I mean, I know where I am. I'm right here. But as far as saying where right here is, I haven't got a clue. Do I orient myself with Andromeda, right? Or with the Pleiades, or with, astronomical things? Or do I show my right here-ness, right, is my right here-ness could be so many meters from the western edge of Queenstown and so many meters from the eastern edge of Queenstown. I could orient myself that way. But what if I was orienting myself in a kind of continuously creative, dancing, networking of relating and relationships? And could I consider that this mystery, which we all know what it means, but haven't necessarily spent any time trying to recognize more clearly what we mean by what it means, right? Like the meaningfulness, right, is my compass. That I kind of find myself encouraging movement in the direction of meaningfulness. And I find myself discouraging movement in the direction of something else. Okay. So I've got quite a few possibilities that I could verbalize this week. But I'd like to really begin with you trying to as meaningfully as possible, right? Reveal a glimpse to the group of what meaningfulness, meaningful living, meaningful being, meaningful moment, what is that to you? Right? I guess we have to explore meaningful living together here. That's what we're doing. And so if I don't know what you mean and you don't know what I mean, and we haven't even started, so we're going to begin.
For me, when I experience moments of meaningfulness, I feel a warmth inside myself. And I have different experiences in different situations. So if I've been teaching with a student and I feel that that's been meaningful, I feel sort of warm and fuzzy. If I'm painting, I feel a flow, but that feels meaningful to me as well. In the flow.
I'm hoping that maybe with people volunteering some aspect of their experience, that we may, in listening to each other, go, oh yeah, that's what I mean, and in the process maybe it becomes clearer for us. Yeah? Anyone else?
Creating value.
Sorry?
Creating value.
Yeah.
For other people.
For other people, yeah.
And it also contain myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's meaningful.
Mm.
I think it's meaningful for me to be recognizing that so many other people took the same path I did this morning.
In which way did you mean path?
To hear. It was quite easy for me, but it was a path there.
Yeah.
For me, it's valuing being over doing,
Yes.
because I've grown up with the value of doing, and I've had to relearn being is okay, being is important.
Mm. I wonder if we can. I wonder if a moment of being, so to speak, could, if we looked very carefully, we could see the matrix of doing that gives rise to this moment of being. I understand what you're saying, but I suppose somewhere in here the question "who's doing" has to come in, because that's actually critical with this. But if surely we don't mean no doing like no action. It's not being isn't static, is it? Yeah.
Well, on the Dharma path, I'm always going, how's this meaningful to me in respect to the path, the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the right intention of actually achieving everything on that path, but which is not achievable for me, but I always feel that I give it a good go, and that's me and my intention to be meaningful with life and interconnecting with all beings in the right way.
I was in Dunedin for a couple of days with my brother, and one of the things that we did one afternoon was we went to a second-hand machinery warehouse. They're just heaps of huge equipment and small equipment and boxes upon boxes and shelves that you go down. And we were looking for something that we could make a door handle for a large sliding door. And it needed to fit, needed to become part of it, but all there was in this big warehouse was just heaps of interesting stuff, but they weren't door handles, they were potential door handles, they were parts that could become. collection really of potentials, of things that this would work with it, this would become part of it, this could work, and this could go with that. And it became a narrowing down until we realised this would work with the door, this would become part of the door and the hand that held it and pulled it. So it's that sort of thing that becomes, that's when it's no longer separate. So we walked into a warehouse of separatenesses
Mm-hmm.
and we said, oh, but that could become part of something bigger.
I was just reminding you of this kind of way of speaking that I used a little bit earlier about this sense of a tactile, kinetic sense of your experience, like the way many people have described into words, right? In a sense, this is a way of trying to share something of it with others. But when I'm talking about this tactile, kinetic sense of the experience, there is this thing that you're trying to describe, which seems to, the commonality running through all of this seems to have something to do with connectedness, right? There's a felt sense of this. There's a felt sense of being less connected. There's a felt sense of being more connected, right? The more tuned we can become to this, the more familiar we can become with this, the more this can serve as a compass, right? Are you with me? If it's like I've got a compass, but it's like very difficult for me to see. You know, so I can only see it if I've got the torch at the right angle and so on. But if I run out of batteries, then even if I got the torch at the right angle, I still can't see the compass, right? Or I rent the compass and it's very expensive and I can't really afford to keep it with me all the time, right? So I've got to hope that I, you know, on those small moments where I can splurge and rent the compass, I just happen to need the compass at that moment, right? But in a sense, becoming so familiar with this that the compass isn't something that's rare and difficult to rent, right? We don't have to have some other external light source to illuminate for us, right? Some Buddhist teaching or some other being, right? It becomes more and more, this is like internalized, the very nature of my living, which is one of omni-connecting. I'll call it that way because I'm trying to indicate connection happening at many different levels and dimensions and domains and so on all at the same time, right? And there's a feeling of this like participating in this meaningful living, right? And, you know, tongue-in-cheek, not really even tongue-in-cheek, it should be tears on cheek, right? We added in disruptive times, and particularly these disruptive times, but I wonder in a way when we really look at the question of meaningful living, if we couldn't describe anything that's not optimal meaningful living disruptive. And so it's just that climate change and, you know, collapse of democracies and this and that and the other, and we can go on and, right, it's actually no big deal. You know, the Buddhists recognized this a long time ago. They called it, it was very simple. It was just dukkha. Right? Right. So in a sense, this question of how to live meaningfully, right? Exploring meaningful living. Actually, it's not a question of how to live meaningfully. It's a willingness to meaningfully explore living, to explore meaningful living. It's an exploration. It's not information we're getting. You understand? It's like it's the act of the living. It's in the act of the living that this becomes meaningful.
And the interrelationships?
Sorry?
The interrelationships between beings?
Yeah. Or I would even like better the interrelating of beings. You know, because if we talk about relationships, it's almost like we've packaged them again, and then the inter, right? Whereas like it's like there's an interrelating that's happening now. It's primordial. We are like this sense of we are held and mothered in a matrix of connectivity. Okay? This has been the second you were able to look, and you did look, because there's, in a sense, when I say the second you were able to look, I don't mean merely that you could open your eyes for the very first time and look, right, like that. But you could open your eyes, but you don't necessarily look, right? You have to use your eyes. You know, you have to use your ears. You have to, right, and so on. But as soon as you begin to look and to smell and to see and so on, the act of the looking and the smelling and the seeing and so on carries you to other things. And a lot of them are sniffing you. Right? We kind of mutually sniff each other. Right? We're kind of sniffing out meaning. Imagine like there's pluses of international travel. Right? It's a hassle, and you get older and jet lag gets harder and all that kind of stuff. But one of the pluses is the beagle. Right? You know what I'm talking about, eh? It's great. You know, you come in, it's all like, you know, you importing this, and are you bringing in more than $10,000 cash, and everything is like terribly, right? And then out comes this wonderful little beagle, right, with really fluffy ears, and right, he's running all over the place, sniffing, and everyone smiles, right? It's great. It's like the whole space changes when people see the beagle, unless, of course, you know that you've got a whole pile of dope in your bag and you're, right? And, you know, this is a beagle sort of sniffing out meaning. It's not such a crazy idea, the idea of sniffing out meaning. I think that's better than kind of intellectually figuring out meaning, because it's getting closer to the truth. We kind of sniff it out.
That is a skill, though.
It's a skill that we can augment. The skill is in augmenting it, right? What I'm hoping by the end of this weekend, anyway, is to show that it's always been here with us. We wouldn't be what we are without it, and so we don't have to skillfully bring it forth. But what we probably need to do is to skillfully carry it further, right? Basically, some people, they hold the Dharma with great reverence. They might say they hold the Dharma in great reverence. You know, you say, oh, I hold the Dharma in great reverence. Okay? And I can remember before, believe it or not, before Amazon existed. I'm not talking about this great mighty river that flows through South America, right? I'm talking about the ability to, initially, I still have this kind of thing. I think of Amazon and I think of books, but I mean, it's probably the tiniest fraction of their business now, but you know, it began books. And one of the challenges I found when I came from North America to New Zealand to live was the difficulty of, you know, getting my hands on books and things. It was like really hard. You couldn't just, you know, you'd have little booksellers around and everything. You don't know what they are. And nobody's using the internet for anything and all this kind of stuff. And so Amazon came along, right? And I can remember ordering for the Wangapeka, you know, I wanted to get the whole Pali Canon translated into English, and you know, along came the Sutta Pitaka, the Digha Nikaya, and the Majjhima Nikaya, and I ordered them all at once, and there was this big box came from Amazon. I remember carrying it up the hill because you had to lug it up the hill. We lugged it up the hill. I felt like I was carrying the Dharma, right? I was like, it was a wonderful feeling, right? Brought it up and we kind of enshrined it, right? It felt like, oh, this is great. I'm carrying the Dharma, right? And that's quite legitimate, right? But it may eclipse the recognition that at that very moment of feeling like I'm carrying the Dharma, I am being carried by Dharma. Right? It's right, and it's like we put a lot of effort into how to carry the Dharma. You know, it's like, how do I comport myself? That's for during the week. Right? This weekend, not this weekend. This weekend, something else, right? But then during Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? How do I comport myself? You know, like how do I? It's kind of like how do I carry to carry the Dharma, right? You kind of look this way, have this kind of secret handshake, right? Whatever it is, particular kinds of little insignia, so other people can recognize you're in, right? We're all in the kind of in club here. Right? It's like I'm going to carry the Dharma, but there's another larger view that this act of sensing that I'm carrying the Dharma is itself nestled in a larger unfolding of life, right? That in a sense the Dharma is carrying me. And in fact, we are relating, right? And we can, you know, first of all, the first step you might say is to begin to recognize this. When we begin to recognize this, we could think of this as a transformative view. Right? When we really begin to recognize, right, that, I mean, I know I'm using a jargon here, but it's just like that it's more than me carrying the Dharma, carrying on with Dharma, practicing Dharma. Right? But it's also me appreciating with trust, faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness. We completely let go, right? And are carried by it, whilst at the same time I've completely let go, I am carrying and cultivating it. Oh, it's very complicated. Look, if you don't like it, pray to be reborn as a pebble. They really don't have these issues. They just need to know that the ground is stable, and if it's not, they go with the flow until it is stable. Right? Right? But for some reason, right, we have found ourselves to be Homo sapiens, right? Embedded in a biosphere. That's what we found ourselves, right? And, you know, we begin to wake up to this, right? So I think of this as like a transformative view. It's you know, if I was going to be very Buddhist, it's like we're right on the edge of what we might think of as a kind of enlightened attitude, right? A sense of aspiration, nudging, right? It's kind of a bodhicitta, if you like, but I don't want to say that because I want to stay with the tactile, kinetic quality of this, right? And in Buddhism, I mean, this is obviously, for many of you, in the realm of what we call prajna. wisdom. Right? This kind of profound, multi-dimensional, multi-domain, unpin-downable moving of interbeingness, right? Of carrying the Dharma and being carried by the Dharma, right? And then, my God, what are we, as if this is the end. No, this is the beginning. Right? If in the Theravadan tradition, you've got this great and wondrous text, the Visuddhimagga, which begins with many of you know this, Dewa appears to the Buddha and says the inner tangle and the outer tangle, this generation is entangled in a tangle. So pray, Gautama, who can untangle this tangle? Right? And then the Buddha proceeds to give an answer which goes for 1,500 pages or however long the Visuddhimagga is. And essentially it boils down to, if someone should cultivate sila, samadhi, and prajna, right? Such a being could untangle this tangle. And this is the way we in the West often tend to look at Dharma practice, right? We begin, right, with behavior, with relationship, with ethics, with morality, with how we live with each other. Say, oh, that's very good. Get that one together, and then if you get that together, you maybe some beings might get interested in developing samadhi, which is kind of the realm of exploring life and living in a more subtle, focused, concentrated manner, meditation. Right? And if we're really good at that, and if everything goes really well, we might eventually get a little tiny sort of glimpse of wisdom. And this is a kind of a classical way, but the difficulty is that what if, like, the wisdom is what allows us to recognize what's meaningful and what's not meaningful, right? And what if we don't have that? And then we go, well, how do we live well together? Well, what we do is very easy. We just get rid of that type of person, and we dispense with that type, and we end up in a universe, in a world that looks very strangely like the world we live in today. So this is a challenge, you see, in the Tibetan, in the Vajrayana tradition. We actually turn it around backwards, and we begin with prajna. Right? So first of all, we develop this prajna. I want to not talk about prajna. I want to explore prajna this weekend. Right? This, what we mean by this kind of basis, if you like, of understanding of what we are, where we're going, and what we're doing. Right? And then with this in mind, we could then, looking at the situation we're in, I know on one hand, right, increased sense of meaningful connectedness is what gives my life, makes my life worthwhile. And a kind of a disintegrating loss of connectedness makes my life, really questions my sanity and my sense of well-being, and everything falls apart. This is very clear, right? And I know this very, very clearly. And meanwhile, right, we're living in, I didn't add that little bit just to be sort of sarcastic or snarky or anything, in disruptive times, because I think we're living in extremely disruptive times. And it's like the difficulties of imagining any kind of long-term future for our children or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren, regardless of whether you genetically have children or not, right? We are all, in a sense, parenting this world into being. It's too painful to even contemplate. sometimes. You know, it's a mess. Right? So this question of how do we comport ourselves? On one hand, we've got this compass that has these values, and in another sense, we find ourselves in this situation. Right? What does it mean to practice Dharma while the Titanic sinks? You know? I mean, or could we begin to have a slight shift in our understanding so that even the word practicing Dharma perhaps starts to be less useful for us? And we may start to sort of maybe it's exactly the same thing, but I'm just sort of putting it in different words. Maybe this is question of how can I encourage, how can I live in relationship with this world that I find myself in a way that encourages meaningful living for myself and for the beings that I interact with. Okay? It's not too uncommon to be concerned with meaningful living. It's much rarer to be concerned with meaningful living that takes into account that it's important for you that the person that you're interacting feels that it's meaningful too. Right? It's sort of like it's usually meaningful living something I consider. I had a very meaningful morning. I met with the Queenstown Dharma people, and I gave this brilliant class and so on. It felt very meaningful and worthwhile thing to do. Right? But it's possible for me to have that thought without considering whether or not it was meaningful for you. Right? But I want to trying to raise the possibility that when I'm talking about this, it could be bigger. Like, how do I comport myself so that if I really begin to realize, if I can really feel in my bones that everything about my life, my relationships with others, with my children, with my parents, with my family, with the ecology, with the environment, whatever you want to acknowledge, right? That this is like of vital importance to me. It's everything. For that to vanish away is like incomprehensible. It's the end of the universe. Okay? And recognizing that actually, surely this is the foundation that's going to be in everybody. This need. And so this question, which I'd like to look at during the week, we're having long mornings, so you see, this is just a kind of introduction. We'll have a little tea break, and then we'll really get into it. Right? But I'm just sketching out the week here to try and encourage you to come. Right? We'll look at how do I comport myself in such a way that might encourage our meaningful livings. Okay? And then next weekend, right? Maybe when we start to get a glimpse of not just how do I comport myself, but I find myself comporting more often in this fashion. Right? Because sometimes we can have a how-to, but we don't really become it. You know, when you're doing it, you don't ask the question, how do you do it? When you know what I mean? Like the question how to do it is important to people who are not doing it. But the question how to do it is not important for people who are doing it. Right? So we have to trivialize this question. Right? And when we begin to, in a sense, the question no longer has the juice, we start finding that this mystery of samadhi, of union, and meditation has something to do with that, contemplation and so on, and into a kind of great what's the ultimate expanse of union? It's a peculiar way of speaking. I mean, we have this vehicle in the Buddhist teaching of Mahayana and it's sometimes referred to as great vehicle. And we have this mysterious, wonderful name particularly associated with Tibetan Buddhism, Mahamudra, right, which is hard. It's not as easy to translate as great vehicle, but I guess great gesture, great mudra. What on earth does that mean, right? But it's wonderful to contemplate and to remind ourselves that the prefix maha means more than great, that it also means magnanimous, right? And so we talk about a magnanimous vehicle or magnanimous gesture, right? And this kind of ultimate samadhi of magnanimous gesture. And we find that with that, our insight into transformative view, prajna, and connectedness and meaningfulness changes, and our compass morphs over the course of our life. Not just the direction, but the compass itself morphs, our understanding of what constitutes a life of Dharma. So this is really, in my mind, an attempt to kind of introduce where we might go this week. Any thoughts or questions? Otherwise, we'll just have a little break. I've kind of, you might have noticed that my schedule for meeting with people is a little bit diminished from what we've done in the past. So just do mornings, but a little bit longer morning. And so it's too long just to sit here all that time. So we need a little break, we need a little refreshment, right? So today's a big eating day, I understand. So we'll have a little, let's have a moment to have a break, right? Have a cup of tea or something like that. And then we'll come back, and I'd like to begin to explore meaningful living. Okay. Are there any thoughts at this point, right? It's like, or requests? And I mean that seriously, because anything that you bring to these meetings with that's important to you, that's like moving in your heart, then that we can incorporate into this, because that's what's important, right? So I'm asking like suggestions, because if there's any particular areas in this general topic that at the beginning you might thought, I wonder if we might explore this or we might explore that, then you could mention it and see if we can weave it in and make it part of our exploration. Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested. Well, one of the things that interested me about coming today was the disruptive times.
Yes.
And that's really because I think having to confront the times that we're in is quite an overwhelming thing for individuals to have to do.
Yeah.
It may not change the meaning or how we try and find meaning, trying to connect with each other and all of the things that you've spoken about this morning. But I do feel like it's a bit of a shock what's happening, and it takes quite a lot to come to terms with it and accept it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it may lead to, actually for a lot of people, it may lead to, it may help catalyse this understanding of what meaning really is. To me, it feels like it's quite I suppose, for me personally, it's something that is really making me rethink a lot about my life and what's meaningful in it.
Yeah.
And what's important.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is extremely important. That I mean, I may possibly have sounded like I'm downplaying it a little bit, but I'm not. The It's right here, right center. Right? You know, in probably all mystical paths, spiritual paths, and so on, there's an equivalent of this. And in the Christian mystical path, they talk about the dark night of the soul, and it's almost like you get to this point where you just don't know. You can't move forward. You can't move backwards with it, and so on. And this is a classic point that the yogi or the seeker or the whatever you're going to call them meets with, and every tradition has found ways to lend support to the beings when they are in that place. The problem that we have today is that a whole lot of people are meeting with a kind of dark night of the soul without actually ever agreeing to be part of a religious tradition of unfolding, right? It's erupting all over the place around us, whether we like it or not, right? And, you know, the reason why in these various wisdom traditions, if you like to call them that, that they would have acknowledged this, and this is not something wrong. This is a place where human beings come to of doubt and so on, and not knowing, and here's some support for you. This is what you could do to help, and so on. And it gives a little bit of confidence that, I'm just fallen off the deep end, right? I have a way forward. And the reason why we have that is because they recognize that if you just leave the person there, I mean, what's the difference between the dark night of the soul and a psychotic episode, right? Or a complete mental breakdown. I mean, we're risking sanity in our society, the levels of stress, of concern, the impossibility of some of these questions that are facing us. And so the question of how to support ourselves, how to see that, in a sense, the meaningful living, it's not that the meaningful living is something completely different. How can we find meaning in the midst of disruptive times, right? Not that getting rid of the disruption is the only way I can get to the meaning. Because I think if we look, we'll see that there's always been disruption. And probably everyone feels that the disruption that's happening for them is the ultimate. Right? You know what I mean? If you suddenly find yourself in the midst of the First World War, the Second World War, it's pretty ultimate. If you found yourself in the midst of bubonic plague, right, or the Romans invade, right, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, political and social and ecological and famines, and Krakatoa blows up and you happen to have a nice little retreat hut on the flank of Krakatoa, right? Right? End of my retreat, right? And so, we, in a way, it's almost, again, this is not trivializing it, and because there's ups and downs, but this is also reasonable evidence to name this. We're entering into the sixth extinction. This is reasonably, as well as we can identify 5 previous ones, the implications of all of this. So there's perilous times. And to meaningful living in perilous times, right, I think is really important. And it requires that we avail ourselves of support for doing this, because it's incredibly difficult to find it when we're feeling isolated and on our own. Right? That's just the kind of the ecological reality of it. We're in this together. So, I think it's a really important thing, and we'll we're going to weave this through all the way through. Yeah. Do you?
Kind of half, almost on the verge of asking a question.
Yes.
You know, you were talking about meaningfulness and what's meaningful to you. And
Yeah.
the fact that you were asking us about what our individual sort of compasses are.
Yeah.
And even though there seems to be sort of like a theme, there's all these sort of different interpretations and there's different things that came to everybody's minds. So then you said about having worthy life or like that sort of idea of worth.
Yes.
And to me, when you were talking initially about meaningfulness, like I was thinking about my compass and what makes me feel meaningful. Like for me, it's trying to show and share love with people, like whatever their situation, and trying to just give them a little bit of joy or feel a bit of love. And one of the things I was then thinking is like on a smaller scale, I think about sort of conversations I have, like with people, you know, like when they're feeling low, and when you listen to them, you get that buzz and that feeling, and in that moment, it feels like it's meaningful to them as well. But then when you started, it's the word worth, is in how, what is a worthy life?
Yes.
Like how, and especially if everybody's got a slightly different interpretation about that, you know, it sort of made me just feel sort of like this feeling of sort of inadequacy on like a lifetime scale.
I can't
Can't
really.
really kind of communicate sort of fully what I'm getting at, but it's like emotionally in my brain and probably my ego, just the word worth kind of from like an outside perspective, like am I living a worthy life? Sorry, that wasn't really a question, more of a ramble.
Yeah, so you need to Google it, you know, and you go, worthy. What do I need to do to be worthy? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's kind of obvious that kind of worth is the problem, isn't it? You know, and I wonder if, you know, the sense of a transformative view, I use this word, right? This is like a view and understanding of what we are, how we are, what we're doing, which it transforms the view we had yesterday. Or, you know, it's like it's a growing thing, right? That we begin to glimpse that another criterion of worthiness beyond what we could Google up, right? What these people say or those people say, or right beyond the ego. Right? It's a deeper, and so it is something we need to look at, and something I think this week we can look at. Yeah. Shall we have a little break and stretch and time to use the toilet if you need to, or we could have a cup of tea and then come back together and proceed.